They say silence is empty. But what if silence isn't emptiness at all? What if it's a language older than speech, deeper than sound? You know that moment when a room goes still, and suddenly you can hear your own heartbeat? That's not the world getting quieter. That's you getting louder inside. Every thought you never said, every question you never voiced, they live there in the silence. And here's the strange part. Your brain, it loves that silence. It uses it. It reshapes you through it. Science says that when noise fades, your brain doesn't rest. It begins to reorganize itself, strengthening memory, emotion, and imagination. 2 minutes of pure silence can spark activity in the hippocampus, the same region that builds your identity. So maybe silence isn't the absence of life. Maybe it's the factory of who you are. But let's go deeper. Have you ever noticed how quiet people seem to know things first? They read a room without speaking. They feel a shift before it happens, almost like they're tuned to a different frequency. Neuroscientists call it hyperattunement, a state where observation becomes instinct. Because when you stop talking, your senses finally start listening. Think about it. In every conversation, there are two voices, the one speaking and the one listening inside your head. Most people let the outer voice win, but quiet minds, they train the inner one. They analyze tone. They notice micro-expressions. They map emotions like constellations. And that's why silence, for them, isn't awkward, it's data. Let me ask you something. Do you ever sit in silence so long that time starts to stretch? Seconds feel like minutes. Minutes feel like memories. That's your brain entering what psychologists call the expanded now. In that state, you process reality more slowly and more accurately. It's the same state monks reach in deep meditation, and the same pattern found in artists who lose themselves in creation. So, when you sit alone, quiet, eyes unfocused, you're not wasting time. You're training perception. Still, people misunderstand silence. They think quiet means shy. They think still means weak. But the quietest person in the room is usually the one watching everything. They're not lost in thought, they're gathering evidence. Emotionally, psychologically, energetically, and when they finally speak, it's not to fill space, it's to change it. Have you noticed something? When silence grows between two people, you start to feel it physically. In your chest, in your breathing, in the space between words. That's because silence triggers the limbic mirror system. Your body starts mirroring emotion without needing language. You literally feel what the other person hides. So maybe quiet people aren't distant. Maybe they're too connected. Let's test a thought. What if silence isn't passive? What if it's an active force, a field your brain uses to rewrite itself? Every time you stop reacting, neurons reroute. Every pause rewires. Every breath you take creates a micro-choice between chaos and control. The loud forget this. The quiet practice it. And maybe that's why some of the most brilliant minds in history were lovers of silence. Nikola Tesla said he could hear entire inventions in moments of solitude. Einstein took long walks alone to hear thoughts more clearly. Even Da Vinci wrote, "Silence strengthens authority." They all understood the same truth. Silence isn't empty. It's fertile. But here's the twist. Silence also tests you, because when everything stops, you finally meet yourself. No background noise, no distraction, just your thoughts. And sometimes, that's the loudest sound of all. Have you ever tried sitting with your own mind? No music, no phone, no noise, and felt uncomfortable after 10 seconds? That discomfort, that's your brain detoxing from overstimulation. Modern psychology calls this cognitive withdrawal. When the dopamine from constant input drops, your mind starts to crave noise again. But if you stay silent long enough, something beautiful happens. The craving fades, and clarity begins. It's like cleaning a fogged mirror. Slowly, your true reflection appears. So if you've ever felt that restlessness in silence, don't run from it. It's not emptiness. It's the start of self-awareness. Do you remember the last time you truly listened, without planning your reply? When someone spoke, and you just absorbed the weight of their words. That's silence, too. Silence between thoughts, between judgments, between the reflex to answer. That small pause is where understanding lives. Quiet people master that pause. They don't rush to fill it, they explore it. They let emotions breathe before deciding what's real. And that's why they seem calmer under pressure. Because while others react, they process. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they've learned to translate feeling into wisdom before it escapes their lips. Here's something wild. MRI scans show that during moments of deep silence, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision and personality, begins to synchronize with the limbic system. That means logic and emotion start to work together. The brain literally becomes more balanced. So when people call you too quiet, remember, your brain might just be more coordinated than theirs. But silence isn't always peaceful, is it? Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it hurts. Because silence also amplifies the voices we've buried. Old memories, unspoken guilt, unanswered questions. They all surface in the quiet. And it feels like the mind is attacking itself. But in truth, it's cleansing. Every thought that reappears in silence is something you're ready to release. Stay with me here. Imagine your thoughts like dust in sunlight. When the room is noisy, you don't see them. But when everything stills, the light reveals what floats within. That's silence. Light for the inner world. So instead of fearing it, use it. Let silence show you what still lives inside you. In this first part of our journey, remember this: silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of awareness. It's your consciousness tuning itself to the frequency of truth. And if you've made it this far, you already know quiet minds don't hide from the world. They study it, they decode it, they build it back better. So breathe, listen, because in the next part, we'll step even deeper into the science of why the quietest people think the loudest. They say when you stop talking, you start hearing the truth. But what kind of truth is it? The one about the world, or the one about yourself? Because silence doesn't just reveal what's outside. It exposes everything you've been hiding inside. Have you ever noticed that when you sit alone too long, your mind starts replaying things you thought you'd forgotten? Moments, faces, conversations that ended years ago. You try to brush them away, but silence brings them back, one by one, like unfinished pages of a book that demand to be read. That's not madness. That's memory cleansing itself. It's your brain saying, before I move forward, I need to understand what still hurts. Psychologists call it emotional integration. It's when silence helps connect scattered memories so you can see the full picture of your story. You see, the quiet mind doesn't erase pain. It redefines it. And that's why silence can feel heavy, because it's the weight of transformation. And while you're sitting there wondering why you think too much, why your brain won't stop replaying things, remember this: overthinkers are often just deep feelers trying to decode patterns the world ignores. You don't overthink because you're weak. You overthink because your mind is a magnifying glass trying to find meaning in noise. But here's the twist: silence turns that magnifying glass inward. And that's where growth begins. Because when everything outside goes quiet, your inner world gets loud enough to finally be understood. That's the beauty of it. You can't lie to yourself in silence. There's no performance, no pretending, just honesty, raw and real. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat alone and actually liked who you were in that moment? Most people fill silence with distractions because they're afraid of that question. But those who learn to love their own company, they become unstoppable. Because once you're comfortable in silence, nobody can control you with noise. Scientists at Harvard found something fascinating. When people spend even 10 minutes in silence each day, their amygdala, the brain's fear center, starts to calm down. Anxiety lowers, focus sharpens, empathy rises. So maybe the cure to chaos isn't always more noise. Maybe it's less. And maybe that's why quiet people often seem mysterious. They're not hiding secrets, they're processing worlds. Every glance, every word, every silence around them adds another piece to a puzzle they're building in their mind. That's why they don't react instantly, they respond precisely. You might think they're detached, but in truth, they're just listening deeper than most people ever will. Because silence isn't absence, it's awareness. And awareness is power. So, if you've ever been called too quiet, too distant, too hard to read. Don't let that bother you. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just learning in a language the world forgot to value. The language of silence. And that language might just be the most intelligent one of all. You see, silence is not just the absence of sound. It's the presence of meaning. It's where every thought, every emotion, every memory gathers and decides what kind of person you're becoming. Have you ever wondered why some people say the most powerful things without saying anything at all? It's because silence speaks in ways words never can. A glance, a pause, that moment when someone just listens instead of reacting. Those are the moments that tell you everything about who they are. There's a strange kind of energy in silence. A tension that holds the space between what's said and what's meant. Between truth and the fear of speaking it. And the people who master that energy, they command attention without raising their voice. Because when you don't need noise to prove your worth, you've already won half the game. Neuroscientists discovered that during silence, the brain doesn't shut off. It actually becomes more active. It starts connecting ideas that seemed unrelated. It creates patterns, solves problems, and even rewires emotional responses. That's why so many breakthroughs, from art to science, were born in solitude, in long walks, quiet nights, or the sound of nothing but one's own heartbeat. Let's take a moment. Think about all the noise in your daily life. Notifications, voices, traffic, chaos. Your mind becomes like a crowded room. Now imagine one door opens, and suddenly everything stops. It's just you and your thoughts. That's the first real moment your mind starts breathing again. But silence can also be uncomfortable, can't it? Because in that stillness, you meet parts of yourself you've been avoiding. The insecurities, the regrets, the what-ifs, the versions of you that never got closure. That's why silence feels so intense, because it doesn't let you hide. Yet here's the truth most people don't realize. You can't grow without facing yourself. And silence is the mirror that shows you who you really are. Some people avoid it forever. Others learn to use it to heal, to reflect, to evolve. And those are the ones who glow differently. You can feel it when they walk into a room. They don't need to dominate. They don't chase validation. They just are. Grounded, aware, completely at peace with their own thoughts. There's a quiet kind of confidence that silence builds. It's not loud. It's not arrogant. It's steady. It's the kind of confidence that whispers, "I know who I am," even when no one's watching. And maybe that's the lesson silence is trying to teach us. That real strength isn't proven in noise. It's revealed in stillness. Because anyone can talk, but not everyone can listen, and even fewer can understand. So if the world feels too loud, too demanding, too fast, don't fight it with more sound. Withdraw, breathe, let silence reintroduce you to your own thoughts. Because maybe the answers you've been searching for have been whispering this whole time, you just never stopped to listen. You've been listening long enough to feel it now. That strange pull in the stillness, that quiet weight pressing against the edges of your thoughts. The deeper you move into silence, the more alive your inner world becomes. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real paradox of human psychology, that what feels like emptiness on the outside is overflowing on the inside. Every time you fall silent, the world assumes you're passive. They mistake your stillness for hesitation, your calm for weakness. But inside, the quietest people are running mental simulations of entire universes. They analyze, interpret, calculate, and predict, all without a sound. Have you ever noticed that the people who rarely speak often end up saying the most meaningful things when they finally do? Why is that? Maybe because words, for them, are not tools of noise, they're weapons of precision. They don't speak to fill space. They speak to change it. Science actually confirms this. fMRI studies at the University of California found that during extended periods of silence, the brain's default mode network becomes hyperactive. This network is what handles self-reflection, emotional regulation, and creative insight. In other words, when the world quiets down, the mind speeds up. So when someone sits in silence for hours, lost in thought, their brain is literally rewiring, forming new neural bridges, reconnecting ideas, processing emotional data. The quiet mind isn't empty. It's under construction. Now think about this. When was the last time you truly sat alone with your thoughts? Without your phone, without music, without distraction? Can you even remember what your mind sounded like? Most people can't, because we've built a life designed to drown ourselves out. But silence, true silence, is like meeting yourself for the first time again. First, it's uncomfortable. Your brain panics, throwing noise at you, regrets, doubts, to-do lists, random memories. But stay there long enough, and something shifts. The noise fades, your breathing slows, and your awareness expands beyond what you thought you were capable of. That's the beginning of what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. The ability to observe your mind as if you were standing outside of it. The quiet people, they live there. They're not just aware of what they think, they're aware of how they think. And that's power. Because if you can see your thoughts clearly, you can change them deliberately. You can choose which ones to feed, which ones to release, which ones to reshape into something meaningful. Silence, in that sense, becomes the ultimate editing room for your soul. But here's the twist most people miss. Silence doesn't just build intelligence. It builds emotional depth. Have you ever talked to someone who listens so deeply, it feels like they're reading the spaces between your words? That's the gift of silence. When you stop preparing your next reply and start truly hearing, you begin to sense emotions, not just facts. Empathy grows in silence. Understanding blooms in silence. And relationships deepen in silence. It's ironic, isn't it? In a world obsessed with expressing ourselves, the people who listen end up understanding everything. Now imagine how this applies to you. The next time you're in a room where everyone's talking, arguing, fighting to be heard, don't compete. Observe. Watch the rhythm of voices, the tension in body language, the micro-expressions in faces. The loud ones will reveal what they think. The silent ones will reveal what they see. And what you'll notice might change how you see humanity forever. Because here's a secret most overlook. The mind in silence becomes telepathic. Not in the science fiction sense, but in the way it begins to read emotional frequencies. You start predicting what people feel before they even articulate it. You sense lies before words form. It's not magic. It's pattern recognition, the deepest form of human intelligence. In silence, the brain becomes an antenna. It tunes into emotional wavelengths that constant noise blocks out. That's why monks, deep thinkers, and philosophers have always sought quiet. Not because they dislike the world, but because they want to hear it better. Let me ask you something. What if your anxiety, your confusion, your burnout aren't signs of weakness, but signs of overexposure? Your brain has been flooded with too much data, too many opinions, too much chaos. Silence isn't running away from life. It's the only way to process it. And that brings us to a fascinating paradox. The louder the world gets, the more valuable silence becomes. Think about it, the attention economy is built to exploit your reaction time. Notifications, headlines, pop-ups, all designed to trigger you. Every ping steals a fraction of your awareness. And every lost second of awareness costs you clarity. Silence, then, becomes a rebellion. It's you saying, I refuse to be programmed. It's you taking back the steering wheel of your own consciousness. When you unplug, even for 10 minutes, your mind starts detoxing. Your neural chemistry recalibrates. Dopamine settles, cortisol lowers, and serotonin begins to rise. That's not philosophy. That's neuroscience. And the result? You start thinking again. You start feeling again. You start existing not as a reaction to the world, but as an observer of it. Now here's something you might not expect. Silence actually enhances memory and learning. In 2013, researchers found that 2 hours of complete silence each day led to the growth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, the area responsible for memory and emotion. Meaning silence doesn't just calm you down. It evolves you. You might be sitting alone, thinking you're wasting time. But in that stillness, your brain is reorganizing data, reinforcing neural maps, and upgrading the architecture of who you are. That's why some of the greatest minds in history, Newton, Tesla, Einstein, all had one thing in common: solitude. They didn't fear silence. They mined it. Einstein once said, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." Notice the word stimulates. Silence isn't sleep. It's stimulation of a higher order, the kind that requires the absence of noise to hear the whispers of genius. And maybe that's what the quietest people know instinctively, that every word you don't say gives your thoughts a chance to mature. When you hold your tongue, you're letting your brain complete the full cycle of an idea, from birth to articulation. Most people interrupt that process by talking too soon. But the silent ones? They wait. They let their ideas incubate until they're undeniable. That's why when they finally speak, people listen. Because deep down, humans don't crave noise. They crave meaning, and meaning only grows in silence. But silence has its shadows too. Spend too long in it, and you can fall into isolation, the kind that builds walls instead of clarity. The trick is to balance solitude with connection, to use quiet as reflection, not withdrawal. So here's a question. Are you using silence to grow or to hide? Because silence can heal, but it can also haunt. If you avoid noise because you fear being misunderstood, your silence isn't peace. It's protection. And that's not the same thing. Real silence, the kind that empowers you, comes from choice, not fear. It's the moment you realize you don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You've already understood yourself. And when you reach that point, silence becomes strength. You stop reacting. You start observing. And slowly, people start noticing. They begin to wonder what's behind your calm. They misread your quiet for mystery. They start chasing your validation. But what they don't realize is you're not playing the same game anymore. You've moved from reacting to reality to designing it. That's the ultimate psychological transformation silence brings. It turns you from a participant into an observer, and from an observer into a creator. Silence, the thing everyone fears yet everyone needs. By now, you've felt it, that strange comfort that creeps in when you stop running. When you stop filling every moment with words, with noise, with distraction. In that quiet, something changes. You begin to hear you. But this silence, the one you've grown into, it's not weakness anymore. It's wisdom. You've learned that not every reaction deserves your energy. Not every battle needs your voice. And not every noise deserves your attention. Because here's the secret: silence is not emptiness. It's a filter. It separates the meaningful from the meaningless, the truth from the chaos. And the people who master that filter, they don't just survive this world, they shape it. Look at the most influential people in history, the innovators, the thinkers, the revolutionaries. They all shared one trait: solitude. They understood that silence is the workshop of creation. When the world goes quiet, the imagination wakes up. When the noise dies, the soul begins to speak. Science explains it beautifully. Your brain has two modes, the active mode and the default mode. The active mode solves immediate problems. But the default mode? That's where meaning is born. It's where your brain reflects, dreams, and reorganizes your memories into new ideas. So when you stare at the ceiling late at night, lost in thought, your brain isn't wasting time. It's building roads between things you never knew were connected. That's why solutions suddenly appear in the shower, or during a walk, or while sitting alone. Silence gives your mind room to breathe. But silence also sharpens something else: perception. Have you noticed how quiet people seem to just know things? They pick up on the energy in a room, the hesitation in a voice, the truth behind the words. That's not luck, that's training. Their brain, unclouded by constant chatter, listens to the world in layers. They hear what others miss. Psychologists call this high sensory awareness. It's when your brain tunes in to subtle details, like micro-expressions, emotional tone, and hidden tension. You might think silence makes you invisible, but in truth, it gives you vision. The loudest people dominate the conversation. The quietest dominate the understanding. And understanding is real power. But silence isn't just about wisdom or power. It's about healing. When you stop feeding the noise, your nervous system resets. Cortisol levels drop. Your heart finds rhythm. Your breath deepens. It's your body remembering peace. because deep inside, your cells crave stillness. We were never designed for constant stimulation. Even nature speaks in silence. The pause before thunder, the hush before dawn, the stillness of the ocean before it breathes again. The earth itself understands rhythm, noise, then quiet, chaos, then calm. So why don't we? Maybe because silence forces honesty. It's in those quiet hours when your mind asks questions no one else dares to ask. Am I really happy? Do I even like who I've become? Am I chasing dreams or just distractions? Those are heavy questions, but they're the right ones, because that's how transformation begins. Not in noise, not in crowds, but in silence, when you finally stop running from your own reflection. And maybe that's what this whole journey has been about. To teach you that silence is not a punishment. It's preparation. It's the space where you gather yourself before you rise again. You see, the world praises the loud, the bold, the outspoken, the fearless. But true strength rarely needs an audience. The tree doesn't make noise while growing roots. The storm doesn't warn before it strikes. And you don't need to announce your evolution. You just become it. So when they say, "You've changed," smile. Because silence taught you how to listen to yourself before listening to the crowd. It taught you to find peace in your own company. And that kind of peace, no one can take away. Think about it. When you finally stop explaining, justifying, defending, you start living. Because silence doesn't need approval. It only needs truth. And maybe that's what this entire human experience comes down to. Learning to live peacefully in the space between sound and stillness. So the next time life feels too heavy, don't fight it with words. Don't drown it with noise. Close your eyes. Let the silence wash through you. Listen to the heartbeat that's been with you since the beginning. It never stopped speaking. You just stopped hearing. In that quiet, you'll find the version of you that isn't afraid anymore. The version that trusts their intuition. The version that understands that silence is not loneliness. It's alignment. And when you reach that point, when the world screams for your attention and you simply smile in stillness, you'll realize something powerful. You didn't need the noise to matter. You just needed to hear yourself again. Because sometimes the loudest revolution is silence. Now I want to know from you, where are you watching from? Which city? And what time is it there right now? And before you go, if this voice touched even a corner of your thoughts, subscribe to Lurix, because silence is only the beginning. Thank you for watching from Jahanzib.